Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. We are about to start. Sorry. I would like to invite Mr. Ronnie Daniel of the UWI Open Campus to lead us in a word of prayer. He will be followed by Mr. Jerome Francis, who would render the national anthem.
Sisters and brothers, good morning. I invite you to stand. This morning, as I walked up the road to fetch my son, as we will say, come to work, I met one of the elders in my community, and I asked him, I said to him, as usual, "Sir, how are you?" He said, "No local language. I'm glad I wake up." I say that to say, that is a lovely day, and indeed the Creator, God, the Divine One, has allowed us the privilege to be here in this place. So let us give God praise and thanks. Let us pray. Almighty God, we give you thanks and praise for this day, for this beautiful day that you have given to us. You have indeed breathed the breath of life into our very being, and we are thankful. We are also thankful for journey and mercies for all of us who are here, and especially those who have come from long distances. We give you thanks that they have arrived safely to this beautiful paradise that you have given to us. We also give you thanks, O Lord, for life and for all the opportunities that life offers to us to grow in fullness, to love each other, and to nurture each other, our children and youth. We thank you for all these opportunities. Now, as we meet in this place to reflect and think and revisit this business of culture and indigenous culture, who we are as a human family, and especially that part of our human family who are sometimes marginalized, put on the fringes of society. Those who came before us, those who were there. We ask you now that even as we have this conversation over this next few days, these next few days, that our conversations will be engaging, but they will be frank, so that at the end of it, we will leave this place energized, equipped, more knowledgeable, and more passionate about what we do, so that indeed the human family that you have so created will encounter your love, and that we will share the love to each other and with each other. This we pray through Christ our Lord. Amen.
Honorable St. Clair Jimmy Prince, Minister of Education, Honorable Cecil Mackey, Minister of Tourism, Sports and Culture, and other members of Parliament, Honorable Godwin Friday, Leader of the Opposition, His Excellency Jose Manuel Ventura, Ambassador of Cuba to St. Vincent and the Grenadines, Mr. James Chow, Minister of the Embassy of the Republic of China and Taiwan, and Lucy Wang, Secretary, His Excellency Francisco Perez, Charge d'Affaires for the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela, and Mrs. Andrina Bermudez, Professor Velma Newton, Impact Justice, who's joining us today and the co-sponsor of this project, of this conference, visiting guests from Guyana, Belize, Suriname, Dominica, and the UK, and we especially want to welcome you because you know you're traveling here at great risk with the coronavirus hanging over all of our heads, and we really do appreciate you coming to be with us today. Members of the clergy, Mrs. Elizabeth Walker, Chief Education Officer, Mr. David Darkey Williams, President of the Garifuna Heritage Foundation, other representatives of the Garifuna Foundation and the University of the West Indies Open Campus, other members of civil society, members of the media. Good morning and welcome. Welcome to the 7th Garifuna International Conference hosted by the Garifuna Heritage Foundation Incorporated in collaboration with the University of the West Indies Open Campus in Vincent and the UWI Impact Justice. This conference is but part of a series of events which mark Heroes Month and celebrate and commemorate the indigeneity of St. Vincent and the Grenadines. Activities began with the school's festival on Friday the 6th and will terminate with the closing ceremony of this conference on Friday the 13th. This indigeneity, of course, refers to the Kalinago and the Garifuna peoples, including those displaced persons who now live in areas far removed from their initial homeland, Yeremin, in other countries such as Honduras, Belize, Nicaragua, Guatemala, and the United States of America. The Garinagu are an admixture of the African and Kalinago people, their histories and their cultures, and who, despite genocide, erasure, and acculturation, have survived and are recognized as a people. In our call for papers for this conference, we boldly declared that the Garifuna heritage and culture has become one of the more important symbols of resistance in the Caribbean. Recognizing the resilience of the Garinagu, UNESCO in 2001 proclaimed that the Garifuna heritage and culture is a masterpiece of the intangible heritage of humanity. As indigenous people and people of African descent, the Garifuna are represented in the 2007 United Nations Declaration of the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. More recently, UNESCO declared 2019 as the International Year of Indigenous Languages in order to raise awareness not only to benefit people who speak these languages, but also for others to appreciate the important contributions they make to our world's rich cultural diversity. The international conferences over the years have focused on history, research and retrieval, erasure and genocide, spirituality, international linkages, heritage tourism, and preservation of cultural sites, with special emphasis, of course, on Baliso. This year, the conference is being held under the theme, Indigenous Caribbean, rethinking a strategic direction for reviving Garifuna heritage and culture through education. Yeremin St. Vincent is revered by Karinago the world over. And I just pause here to share a very brief story. I met someone recently who told a story of coming to visit St. Vincent with some friends from New York. And one of the gentlemen insisted that they must collect some dirt. Grandmother. And they, being younger people, made a lot of mockery about it. Oh, some sort of, oh, be a fool, this she wants this thing for. And, you know, played around with it. But in fact, they take the dirt back to New York. And the gentleman said to me, the lady came out spread it around in her living room and walked on it and said, "Now I have walked on the earth of Uranine." Just to tell you how revered this country is all over the world. These conferences are designed to enhance our awareness of our rich Garifuna heritage and to inculcate in our people a sense of pride and ownership rather than shame here in Uranine itself. Within this context, it is hoped that the conference will encourage the continuing conversation regarding all aspects of the Garifuna heritage and culture, and particularly to engender discourse on reviving the same through both informal and formal education channels. Now to give you a brief overview of the conference. The conference will comprise 6 sessions here at the NIS conference room and 4 workshops to be held at the Peace Memorial Hall along with an exhibition. The 6 sessions begin this afternoon and they are all listed in your program, so I will not state them in details. But this afternoon we'll start off with a session on climate change. On Thursday morning, the sessions will run on heritage tourism, including sessions on indigenous communities in the Caribbean, including a case study of Greg's here in St. Vincent. On Thursday afternoon, we will hear of the role of Afro-descendants in indigenous culture, while on Friday, the last day of the conference, would center on reviving the Garifuna and Kalinago culture with a session on teaching Garifuna history. The 4 workshops are gathering and analyzing oral history among friends and family, which will be a brief study on study skills, a brief session, on study skills for aspiring researchers. And on Thursday afternoon, we can learn about the practices and use of medicinal plants in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. The 2 workshops on Friday, entitled Filmmaking and Heritage and Teaching Garifuna Language to Primary School Children, would also take place at the Peace Memorial Hall, as I said before. We would note that the workshops run concurrently with some of the sessions here, so one would have to make selections regarding your attendance. The conference will end with a closing ceremony at the NIS conference room at 4 p.m. and we would receive the summary of the conference and hopefully see the way forward. I invite you to participate in as many of the activities as you can. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. We will now get into the meat of the matter. The Garifuna Foundation has been on the vanguard of educating Vincentians on the heritage and culture of the Garifuna people. The foundation has not only been involved with activities during Heroes Month, but in training, project development, retrieval and research, and in networking with the diaspora, among other activities. I will now invite Mr. David Darkey Williams, President of the Garifuna Heritage Foundation, to bring you remarks.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. And let me join the Chair in welcoming all of you to this 7th International Garifuna Conference. There is some sort of background that leads up to events like these. And this morning, I'm going to pay more attention in the form, perhaps, of a tribute or a thank you to a lot of the people and organizations that was responsible for St. Vincent and the Grenadines and the Garifuna people in St. Vincent and the Grenadines who ever consider themselves Garifuna. How we got to this point of awareness of the existence of this culture. Every nation has at least one unique inheritance that makes them who they are. So, this country, St. Vincent and the Grenadines, is expected to have at least one unique feature within our psyche. In fact, I venture to say that we have several unique features. And in recent years, the nation's attention has been focused on one of these special gifts of nature. And that special gift of nature is the Garifuna. This special focus takes the form of a quest or a journey to retrieve and reclaim this unique culture, this unique heritage which has been lost to us here in St. Vincent, or was unknown to us, or most of us who are alive today anyway. Most of us here in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, it has been lost for at least 200 years. This journey that I will refer to is undertaken by a number of entities within the country as well as outside of the country who provide guidance, material and moral support. Here at home, the government of St. Vincent and the Grenadines, through the ministries of education, the Ministry of Tourism, Sports and Culture, the Ministry of National Mobilization, the Regional Integration and Diaspora Unit, as well as entities such as the National Lottery Authority, the Carnival Development Corporation, the Royal St. Vincent and the Grenadines Police Force, National Parks, Rivers and Beaches Authority. And then there is the University of the West Indies Open Campus. And of course, us within the Garifuna Heritage Foundation. The foundation is a voluntary but autonomous non-governmental body that spearheads this trust to retrieve and reclaim the lost Garifuna culture. But the journey is not undertaken on a local basis only. It will be virtually impossible to make any progress if we are to adopt that approach. The many Garifuna communities in Belize and Honduras and Guatemala and Nicaragua, and of course in the United States of America. Then there are the many local communities that used to jump at the opportunity to host that program several years ago that we called the Gatherings, which brought together several of the so-called Garifuna communities that we know across St. Vincent today. And regionally, the University of the West Indies, particularly the Cave Hill, the Caribbean Indigenous Peoples Alliance, and Impact Justice. And we are pleased to have the head of Impact Justice at our head table this morning, Professor Newton. Thank you very much for coming, Professor. All of these organizations and the individuals that populate these organizations positively impacted our ability to expand our local and regional networking capabilities. The residue, I beg your pardon, the centerpiece of this journey for the Garifuna Heritage Foundation has been our public education and our public awareness activity. I believe that every one of us in this room this morning particularly those of you who are born-bred Vincentians, all of us are quite familiar with the negative stigma associated with being called a Carib and the unjust treatment meted out sometimes by us who think we are not Carib. The unjust treatment that has been meted out to people who live in Greggs and above the Dry River. The residue of that stigma still lingers on in our society today. But I think that the work of the Garifuna Heritage Foundation over time has done a great deal to negate and even to erase most of that negativity. The journey continues. The installment of Chatoyer as a national hero makes the process a bit easier for all of us. And alongside that, the UNESCO declaration in 2001 of the Garifuna heritage and culture as a masterpiece of the intangible heritage of mankind is a constant inspiration for us here in St. Vincent to propel this journey forward. But even in the light of these accomplishments, hundreds of thousands of Garifuna live constantly under the threat of expulsion from the lands on which they were born, and Garifuna continues to exist as a nation in exile. Is there something the rest of us here in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, or Yurume, as Garifuna people call this country, is there something that we could do to assist with the plight faced by descendants of our own indigenous people? I am proposing that that debate could start very, very soon. History will show that the Caribbean territories always had to struggle for their independence and to assert their self-worth. Even today, we behave as though the political independence we have gained was just a simple walk in the park. We are very passive towards independence. But these earlier struggles were real struggles. The struggles of the Garifuna and the Kalinago, and even those that followed after the Black Caribs were banished out of St. Vincent. Those struggles, their struggle, were real, genuinely bitter, bloody, and prolonged struggles. No other ethnic group in the region, and this is just my conclusion, no other ethnic group exemplifies that legacy, that spirit of the culture of resistance from foreign domination than the Black Caribs, or as we know them today, Garifuna people of St. Vincent. And with that, I want to urge you to continue your support for the foundation and to encourage others not just to attend sessions like these, but also to input whatever you think you could input into keeping this journey, to continuing this journey that we are on to retrieve something that is extremely important to our national well-being. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Williams, or Darky, as we all call him. Thank you very much for your contribution to this morning's proceedings. He, of course, highlighted the importance of the Garifuna people to our heritage and pointed out the work of government, NGOs, and the Garifuna Heritage Foundation itself in reclaiming our culture. But I think what I took away from that is, in fact, a call to arms, that we all recognize the contribution of the Garifuna's resistance to our independence, and perhaps also calling us to remember that in St. Vincent, independence, we should not just accept that independence came easy, but a lot of work and sacrifice went before, particularly by our ancestors. Thank you again, Dad. Now, I'd like to call the Honorable Sinclair Jimmy Prince, Minister of Education, to the podium. He's someone who appreciates our cultural heritage and to whom we look for support, especially as we try to include our Garifuna history in our education system. Please help me welcome Minister Prince Related.
Thank you very much, Dalrymple. Leader of the Opposition, Honorable Godwin Friday. Minister of Culture, Honorable Cecil Mackey. Dr. Newton, Dr. Scott, President of the Garifuna Foundation, Mr. Darcy Williams, members of the Diplomatic Corps, distinguished members of this audience, facilitators, etc. Good morning. I take particular pleasure in being invited to this particular forum and to bring brief remarks at your opening ceremony. I am deeply, deeply honored mainly for two reasons. One, sometime in the mid-1980s, when I was a young youth and cultural activist, I found myself in an organization headed by Nelson Robinson. It was an organization for indigenous people. And we later on developed into a regional organization with our first meeting in St. Lucia. And to tell you the truth, I don't know what happened after that. I was also a member of the National Youth Council, which collaborated with Dr. Kirby, Earl Kirby, of the National Trust, to erect an obelisk at Dorsetshire Hill in honor of our fallen chief, paramount chief, Joseph Chatelier. So coming to this meeting this morning, feeling of nostalgia. And I remember those days of great social engagement and cultural solidarity displayed by many of our young leaders at the time. And I see people here like Mike Brown and Blazer Williams. They know what I'm talking about. Because we follow them because they led the way dealing with these issues. And we thought that the generation that came after them would have helped to sustain it. It didn't happen. That's why I'm very, very happy that the Garifuna Foundation has over the years been holding the reins and been doing something with respect to this very, very important issue of Garifuna heritage in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. The history of the Caribbean is characterized to a large extent by colonization, slavery, resistance, native genocide, and particularly, in the case of our own Garifuna people, exile. It is this ignoble past that is mostly responsible for the current state of the indigenous Caribbean. The fact that we now have to be talking about reviving cultures which dominated these islands for hundreds of years before the advent of the Europeans speak volumes of the far-reaching effect of colonization. But we must not forget, lest we lose more than culture and history. We must not forget, because we are in danger of losing ourselves. I'd like to say again, I'm very heartened, therefore, by this conference. I commend the Garifuna Heritage Foundation, as I have done. I also commend the UE Open Campus for their timely collaboration. This kind of initiative is what is expected of an activist university such as ours. Higher education institutions must continue to focus on these elements that uplift humanity. And the UE, in its noble effort to redefine itself, has been placing great emphasis more and more on these things that make us, as a Caribbean people, more whole, more viable, and a more confident people. And as the institution becomes more agile, one is noticing a greater alignment with the concerns of the Caribbean people. Its ongoing reparatory justice discourse is a case in point, and we know that. The government of St. Vincent and the Grenadines welcomes the international conference because our Garifuna roots are sacred. Our sole national hero is Paramount Chief Joseph Chatelier, and March 14th is our National Heroes Day. Our indigenous settlements are in the process of being transformed in all areas of social and economic life. And we heard from Daki before that there was a time when they were not part of mainstream society. And even their oppressed brothers had problems with them. Indeed, our indigenous communities today no longer see themselves as second-class citizens as they did less than 50 years ago. Despite all of this, I'm sure that we all would agree that not enough of our people here in St. Vincent and the Grenadines appreciate our Garifuna heritage. Their brave resistance to colonization and the struggle for independence for their Yume seem to be lost on the majority. I'm afraid that apart from the heroics of the Garifuna Foundation, the discourse remains mainly in the clutches of academia. And sometimes academia does not give up easily that which it has captured. I personally was exposed in my high school years to some literature on the rise and fall of the Black Caribs by C.I. Martin and Earl Kirby, and quite recently spoke at the launch of a monograph on Chatelier by Dr. Adrian Fraser, who has been at the forefront again of keeping our history alive, and I thank him for that. But these are worthy issues, but they are just glimpses of a very important aspect of our history. Joseph Palacios' more comprehensive probe reveals the Garifuna as a nation without borders. As we've heard before, although they were exiled and scattered, they were able to regroup and to play a very meaningful role in Central America, in fact, in the entire Americas. We are grateful for these, but most of this has escaped the psyche of too many Vincentans. It is my hope that schools in St. Vincent and the Grenadines will see the Garifuna story as a significant one to tell, and that they will tell it with the intensity necessary to make an impression on our young minds. I wish there were more teachers and students here today, because any strategy that omits the educational institutions cannot be very effective. We have to start young. I certainly will continue to encourage the curriculum department of the Ministry of Education to ensure that the teaching of history, our history, becomes mainstream in the education of our students. As you may know, the government has procured the services and scholarship of 4 of our noted historians to write the history of St. Vincent and the Grenadines. No doubt, our Kalinago and Garifuna will feature prominently. We await the end of that assignment, which we hope will string together our patchwork understanding of our history. I hope our visitors will take the opportunity to traverse our beautiful country and appreciate our landscape, our seascape, and our people. You will get an understanding of the reason for the passion displayed by the early inhabitants in the struggle to keep it out of foreign hands. I hope also that you would have a successful conference and that the strategies you come up with will redound to the benefit of all concerned. especially those who still don't know enough about the strong, patriotic, resilient, and brave people and culture which we call Garifuna. Enjoy the conference. Enjoy St. Vincent and the Grenadines. I wish you all the best. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Minister Prince. Of course, he harkened back to the time not so long ago when we were all younger, when, to the age of youth involvement and activism, and perhaps we ought to blame ourselves as the older persons that perhaps we did not inculcate that spirit in the youth, and perhaps we have to in fact to take some of that blame. But he did say that we are in danger of losing ourselves, and I would like to actually thank him very much for the recognition of the work which the UWI, forgive me for being a little artisan, in doing beyond the walls of academia in this whole area of cultural development and cultural ownership. We are heartened by his commitment as a Minister of Education to the teaching of our history in our schools and the development of appropriate curriculum for just that. At the just concluded Schools Festival, we were thrilled by the performance of the dancers of the Lourdes Government School, and they were immediately asked to perform for us today. We would now like to invite the young dancers to, oh, here they come. Thank you very much. Here they come. Please help us welcome them. Thank you very much, students. Another round of applause for our students, please. And I particularly like the way they did it through using the language, and language is certainly part of our conference, and the idea of teaching the language to the primary school students. So that was very encouraging to see that. And those of you may not know, but I am quite an accomplished dancer myself, so I kind of, saw myself there. later. One can always dream. Okay. All right. The next item on our program would be remarks from Professor Velma Newton. I would like to take a moment to introduce Professor Newton. She is the regional director of the Canadian-funded. I bragged this morning to Professor Newton. My handwriting is so bad I can read any handwriting. Now I'm embarrassing myself. She is the regional director of the Canadian-funded Impact Justice Project, which is one of the sponsors of this conference. Professor Newton is an attorney at law and a historian. She was for many years law librarian at the UWI and then dean of the Faculty of Law. She has been a professor since 1995 and was in fact the recipient of the CBE in the Queen's 2002 New Year's Honors. She is also the holder of the Silver Crown of Merit, awarded by the Government of Barbados for her service in legal education. Please help me welcome Professor Newton to the podium.
Thank you very much. Minister of Education, Honorable St. Clair Prince, Minister of Tourism, Sports and Culture, Honorable Cecil McKee, Honorable Goodwin Friday, Leader of the Opposition, members of the Diplomatic Corps, Mr. David Williams, President of the Garifuna Heritage Foundation, Ms. Vanessa Demircian, I hope I got it right, Chair of the Planning Committee for this conference, Magistrate Zoila Ellis, who I believe was head of that committee, or no, deputy head of the committee, I'm not sure which, but my greetings. Mrs. UV Open Campus here in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, and other UV representatives, Dr. Cleve Scott, who will be the keynote speaker, students of various schools in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, persons sponsored by Impact Justice from Guyana, Suriname, Belize, and Dominica, ladies and gentlemen. I am the Regional Director of the Impact Justice Project, which is funded by the Government of Canada and is being executed from the UV campus, the Cave-Hill in Barbados. The project is now in its 6th year, and recently we got an extension for another 2 years, so I'll be around for a little while longer. And we have had many projects being executed here in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. In fact, I was here last week, 2 weeks ago, to launch a community mediation center. And we have been working with the Teachers Training College to implement a restorative practices program. We've also been drafting laws with the government of St. Vincent and the Grenadines and other Caribbean countries. Currently, we are working on insolvency legislation with the government of St. Vincent. We work with the legal profession. We are trying to encourage them to set up a continuing legal professional development program. That is taking some work, but we're at it. And the next big component of the project, this is after the drafting of legislation, is alternative dispute resolution. And as a part of the ADR suite, we concentrate on restorative practices and mediation. And as I said, I was here just last week. We now have a program going with the Teachers Training College. And in terms of mediation, we've set up a service point, and it's in the chambers, adjoining the chambers of Honorable Parnell Campbell, a former Minister of Government in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. But we're here to speak mainly of our work with the indigenous people of the region. We started in 2016 with a major conference in Belize, at which I believe we had well over 100 participants from around the region. And we were looking at the rights of the indigenous people and to hear from them how they thought those rights were being infringed. And then in 2017, we moved to Guyana, where we had another conference. This time it was sponsored along with the American Indian Law Foundation. And we looked at the Inter-American Convention on the Rights of Indigenous People. And at that conference, a Caribbean network of indigenous people was formed. Then next year, because we tried to keep the momentum going, and it includes working with governments behind the scenes. Not a lot of success, but we continue. Then in 2018, we sponsored indigenous people from the region at the Garifuna Heritage Foundation conference right here. And we sponsored a conference in Punta Gorda in Belize, which was attended by the largest number of persons ever that we had, 365 persons, to hear a lecture on the Caribbean Court of Justice's judgment on the Maya Leaders Alliance and the government of Belize. And now here we are. We have made a contribution to this meeting in several ways, one of which is to sponsor the attendance. It was originally 10 persons from the region and 2 from the World Bank in Washington who have specialties in climate change. Unfortunately, yesterday morning, the World Bank told its officers that they were not to travel, and so they're not here, but they're hoping that at a subsequent occasion they can come. And I have to congratulate the foundation on the impressive array of speakers that they've gathered here. Our 2 couldn't come, but the others are, I noticed, very well qualified to speak on the subjects that they're going to be speaking on. And what I would say is that we'll be here again next year. And we're also hoping to work with another Canadian-funded project, Judicial Studies Education, that have been working in Honduras and Guyana to have certain programs to indigenous people. And we're hoping that with their assistance, we can extend that program to the other, outside of the Guyana to Suriname, St. Vincent and the Grenadines, and Belize. So that is it. I'm very happy to be here, and I'm looking forward to the proceedings today and tomorrow. I have to leave tomorrow evening, but I'm really, really looking forward to see how this conference will unfold. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Newton. When I was told that Professor Newton would be at this conference, I said to Zoila and the others, what does she have to do with indigenous people? I know her as, in mediation and dispute resolution and so on. But when one thinks of it, restorative justice fits certainly right in with their interest with indigenous peoples and for the rights of indigenous peoples in the region. So we're very, very happy to have you, Prof, and to see you in your other hat. I am very happy to see that. As an activity which speaks directly to our cultural heritage at this conference, it is well within the ambit of the Ministry of Culture. I would therefore like to invite the Honorable Seth Mackey, Minister of Tourism, Sports and Culture, to bring us remarks.
Thank you very much, Deborah. Leader of the Opposition, Dr. Godwin Friday, colleague Minister Jimmy Prince, other members at the head table representing stakeholders and interest groups in this conference and the development of Garifuna, including President Daki, our keynote speaker, Dr. Cleve Scott, from Justice Project, Impact Justice, we just heard from, members of the Diplomatic Corps, our Garifuna friends from the region, persons from different indigenous groups, other sponsor groups and support groups of this conference, distinguished persons gathered here this morning, the students and teachers and members of the media. I bring you greetings from the government and people of St. Vincent and the Grenadines, and to the visitors to St. Vincent and the Grenadines, and I'm sure that some of you may be first-time visitors. I know that there's normally mention of disclaimers, but this morning I want to mention a claimer. You're now in one of the most beautiful parts of the world, if you have not recognized that already. You're in Garifuna country, Hairuna, land of the blessed, the Caribbean you've been looking for. So I claim all of that, and I invite you to claim it as well. I also take the opportunity to welcome all persons who participate in the week-long activities of the Garifuna Heritage Foundation. I want to say to you that the work of the foundation is well recognized by the government of the Grenadines, by my own ministry, and I want to take this opportunity to congratulate the Garifuna Heritage Foundation for the outstanding work that they have done over the years. I want to ask you to present it. 7 years ago, this conference started as a simple idea that was almost a dream. 7 years later, it is now a well-recognized annual international conference that brings people from all over the region and the world together for this very important program. And not only that, one of the major concerns at the beginning, will this conference be sustainable? And now we see that the Heritage Foundation, they have developed partners in this journey from across the region and the UWI. And I dare say that it is not only sustainable, but it will grow and develop year on year. Put your hands together once more for the Garifuna Heritage Foundation. The series of events that they have outlined, and this is a packed program in a few days, bringing together presenters of quality from across the region and beyond. And this series of events does not only fit into what originally was our National Heroes Day, but it fits in quite nicely into our National Heroes and Heritage Month of activities. As a ministry and as a government, we have set about to bring much more focus on our indigenous people and the contribution that they have made to national development. And now we have a full month of activities that includes events, festivals, groups from across the length and breadth of St. Vincent and the Grenadines, and the diaspora of Garifuna outside of our borders. to put on events and activities that will impact and bring greater consciousness to the development of our Garifuna people. In fact, our month of activities are now much more encompassing and far-reaching and wide in scope. And if I can point to a number of things. With emphasis on ensuring that there is an acceptance that SVG has an indigenous people, and that he pointed to that in his remarks. That we are able to preserve and celebrate the culture and heritage of the Kalinago and Garifuna people. That we provide ongoing support for individuals and groups which promote this preservation. That we support activities, events, and festivals which promote Kalinago and Garifuna. That we encourage sensitizing and educating Vincentians and the world on the Kalinago and the Garifuna. And that we capture and record this rich history and create tourism and economic value for the benefit of our people and of our nation. When you look at your theme for this conference, Indigenous Caribbean, the thinking is strategic direction for reviving Garifuna heritage and culture through education. This theme captures the essence of all of the things that I just pointed to, and would allow us in a focused and direct way to look at those various aspects that would allow us to further grow and develop the Garifuna history of the nation and the world. This conference is relevant, timely, and of great value. Relevant given the full and rich content of the program that has been outlined. Timely as we celebrate National Heroes and Heritage Month here in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, and as we position ourselves to use this rich history to further grow St. Vincent and the Grenadines. And valuable, as the conference will no doubt point to and highlight pathways for us to add value to our Garifuna culture and heritage. Allow me to point to some practical things that we are doing on the ground to further showcase Garifuna and Kalinago. This month, we will focus on activities that will go into schools, into churches, into communities to spread the gospel of Garifuna. These activities will climax with remembrance activity as we celebrate the acknowledgement of our first and lone National Hero, President Joseph Chapuis. That activity will be held on the 14th of this month, coming Saturday, and we do this every year to ensure that the memory of our chief paramount leader, Joseph Chapuis, kept foremost in our mind. Activities are also climax with major events in Greg, in Ovia, and in Fancy, and those events have been growing year on year with greater participation from the community and greater awareness of the Garifuna of St. Vincent and the Grenadines. I also point to activities that are being organized annually as well by the Garifuna Heritage Foundation, by the New York-based Garifuna group, by other groups in the USA, and several other groups locally in St. Vincent and the Grenadines and also regional. These are very important also as we build the Garifuna culture and awareness of the indigenous people of St. Vincent and the Grenadines. This year will be the second year that we are hosting the Garifuna Homecoming event. We have decided that this is going to be an annual event. Last year, we hosted Garifuna from the USA, New York and California. This year, we're going to host close to 60 persons from that region as well. And they also represent the other 4 Garifuna countries, Belize, Honduras, Nicaragua, and Guatemala. So in addition to those 4 groups and the group from New York, they will be coming this year, the first week of August. And they would bring with them expertise, professionals, because as Minister Prince indicated, those countries embraced and were able to develop the Garifuna culture better than we can. We are playing catch up and we are trying to put on as many activities and teach our people what we lost many years ago. So they will bring with them the expertise and they will do workshops and go into the community and help us better understand the culture that we lost. And we had a very successful series of events last year in these communities, and we will replicate it this year, from dance, to poetry, to drumming, to understanding the cultures, the cuisine of the Garifuna people of old. So this is a very important exercise for us, which will become an annual one. As Minister of Culture, and I intensified that process last year, and through the diplomatic level, we have been holding discussions with the 4 Garifuna countries that I mentioned, persons from Guyana, Dominica, to see if we can make reality exchange programs, cultural exchange programs with these persons with indigenous people and also the Garifuna people. So this is something that we'll continue to push. I know that we have some of our brothers and sisters here with us. So we'll see if we can put that into better perspective, the possibility of such cultural exchange programs. On the ground this year, we'll be pushing hard to the next phase of the Cayo project. When we were establishing our international airport, we were doing the excavation. We were both happy and fortunate to have almost bounced the remains of settlement of the indigenous people, and to show that there was a mingling of persons who came from overseas with the indigenous people. The pottery, the graves that were dug up, and importantly there were 4 schools that we found, so that houses were constructed here using local materials, and we have reconstructed those houses using local materials, and we will be developing that site into one of, I suspect, will be one of the more important heritage tourism sites, very good, telling the story about the Garifuna. We'll also be developing the Chateauguay National Park, and we established that last year. We are going to add some new features to that facility, which is located at Ramacon. This again will offer the opportunity more about the Garifuna culture and history of the Vincent and the Grenadines. And the SCG National Trust did wonderful work as well over the years in preserving our patrimony, the history of the Garifuna people. They have pottery and different items in their possession. We will be utilizing it also to help to further enhance the Garifuna history of their country. The ministry next month will open art and craft gallery and a development wing of that center at one place. Already identified the site and we will just continue in the room. That is going to allow us and the art gallery will be organized and operated by Art and Action. I will see some of the members here today. And we'll have art, we'll have craft, but there will be a development wing. And I'm sure that the Garifuna Heritage Foundation will be utilizing that wing to help to promote and further expose the Garifuna culture of Kingston and the West. Minister Prince mentioned Pontypridd. As we celebrated our 40th anniversary of independence last year, Cabinet announced that typically, that as we go into another 40 years, that we have available to our people don't have enough. The history of the nation. This morning we are fortunate to have 3 of the members that have been identified after that history. I noticed on the program the 4th person will join the conference at a later date in the presentation. This morning we have Dr. Adrian Fraser in our midst, we have Dr. Steve Scott in our midst, and we have Dr. Arnold Thomas in our midst, and Dr. Michael Gary Benny to be the 4th person. We have indicated that they will capture this history in various volumes. I'm sure that Dr. Scott, when he makes his presentation, will elaborate more about that. But importantly, I am absolutely confident that we will be sitting down with members on the Garifuna Heritage Foundation and the Heritage Foundation itself. A couple of days ago, we recognized, the National Trust recognized Mr. Morrison Blaisden, who, when we were growing up, knew that that was the person to visit, who wanted to know anything at all about Kingston and the Grenadines. So these would be important resources that they will tap in on to capture that rich history of Kingston and the Grenadines. At the end of the exercise, we will have written, hard, form documents that we can report to that has shown the major response to development of our life. So I want to emphasize the importance of this content over the next few days, point to the different areas that they will focus on over the next few days. And I'm also confident that at the end of this exercise, that you will record for us as a people a number of the aspects that relate to the development of our Garifuna people, that we ourselves as a ministry, as a cabinet, and as a nation can look to and utilize for our further growth, progress, and development. Once again, congratulations to the Garifuna Heritage Foundation and all stakeholders who came together to not only establish this conference 7 years ago, but to ensure that it is true. Put your hands together one more time. So let's collaborate with us. And I want to say to you that maybe Dr. Friday, the government has already collapsed because cabinet is going on now, and myself and Minister Prince is absent, so we may be expelled from. All right, but it's our pleasure being here, and I want to ask if you can excuse us because we have to go and join cabinet that started at 9 o'clock. So my apologies for having me, Dr. Scott. Our apologies, but I'm sure that the information will be captured and we'll be able to look at it. Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you very much, Honorable Minister of Culture. And as I sat there, I listened to the wide range of activities that are being done in Civil and in the diaspora, and in particular, some of the activities that are being done by government itself. And I thought to myself that the minister ought to add into his ministry a department for Indigenous Affairs. So now we can say Honorable Minister of Culture and Indigenous Affairs. I told him I wanted to hear that, because clearly you're doing the work already, Mr. Minister. You might as well claim it to make it real, right? So I want to thank you very much. At this juncture, I would like to ask Mr. Joromo Francis to entertain us with the statement. Thank you very much.
Check 1, 2. Check 1, 2.
I was just waiting to make sure he was done. I was waiting for another piece, so just to make sure that he's taking up his pan there. Thank you very much, Jomo. Thank you. We appreciated that and enjoyed that very much. I would like to mention that the Lauders, the kids, the government school who danced earlier, they won an award at the just concluded school festival, so Best Dance. And I just really wanted to mention that so that we would encourage them. And this is one of the ways that the Garifuna Foundation, in collaboration with the Ministry of Culture, try to inculcate that spirit of appreciation for the Garifuna culture. And I'd also like to make one other announcement, that to draw your attention to the 4 pieces of art that you see at the forefront here, were done by our beloved Scrapey. There he is sitting over here, Scrapey Dopwell. And he loaned them to us for the festival. Thank you very much, Scrapey. And I'm sure you're happy to hear about the center that is happening soon, right, from the minister. Right. Okay, thank you very much. It is now my pleasure to announce our featured speaker, and I'm going to ask Vanessa Demercian, our chairperson of the Conference Planning Committee, to introduce Dr. Scott.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Witi Binafin, a pleasant good morning to everybody. Please allow me to adopt the protocol that has already been established. I'm pleased to give you a brief introduction of our keynote speaker, Dr. Cleve Scott. Dr. Cleve Scott is an historian, cultural critic, music producer, and development specialist. He specializes in the history of St. Vincent and the Grenadines and has been teaching in the Department of History at the UWI Cave Hill, Barbados for over a decade. He is the author of the official citation for the first national hero, Right Excellent Joseph Chatelier, and one of his most recent contributions includes several entries in the publication on the UNESCO Slave Route Project on the Garifuna heritage in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. His research interests include the political history of the Windward Islands and the history of analog and digital technologies in Caribbean music industry. He is one of the authors of the recently government-commissioned History of St. Vincent and the Grenadines to be published in 2 volumes. And he is also head of research for the US-based the African Diaspora Institute of Cultural Exchange and Historical Research, Inc. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Dr. Cleve Scott.
Yes, good morning. Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning, Head of Open Campus, Ms. Dalrymple. Indeed, it's a pleasure that you're here, and I would like you to know that one of the first lectures I did was at the Open Campus in Grenada with Ms. Beverly Steele, when I was given an award called the Julian Fedden Award, 501 pounds and a medal. I forgot to bring the medal today. It's a gold medal. No, of course, I spent it. Leader of the opposition, Dr. Friday, a historian, a trained historian for many of you who don't know, professional historian. I don't hear him very often referring to it, and I encourage you to refer to it more, and perhaps you might be able to make a little more inroads. Right? Dr. Friday, the diplomatic corps, the Venezuelan ambassador. I had the opportunity to visit Casa de las Americas, thanks to Ambassador Dexter. Was Dexter? Yes. He was there? Okay, yeah. The ambassador of Venezuela, still here? For your information, Manuel Carlos Piar, famous revolutionary fighter in the First and Second Republic. I had the opportunity to write on him in the Dictionary of Afro-Caribbean Personalities. It's on sale online. You should buy a copy. If I don't do that, Oxford University Press won't be happy. All good historians, we do that. We promote our works. Also, Professor Newton, who you were told earlier is a historian, but for the sake of the students behind there, Professor Newton is not only a historian, she is a celebrated historian. Silver Men. Write it down, Silver Men. An outstanding piece of work looking at the Panama Canal and all of the migrations. And if you go to Professor Newton's work, you'll see about how many Vincentians from St. Vincent and the rest of the region that went to work on Panama. Silver Men. And a lot of it now has been incorporated into a movie, and I'm certain at some stage Ms. Dalrymple will get copies into the library if they're not there already. Right, Professor Newton? Also, I must tell you that in my early days in 1995, I met Professor Newton come out of our office and dig up some microfilm that nobody have never used. All of the early laws of St. Vincent and the Grenadines are at Cave Hill, thanks to the work of Professor Newton. And sorry for putting in that, but you have to give people the due. And for those of us who don't know, we need to know that. Good. In the audience, we have Dr. Adrian Fraser, from whence we came, and right next to him is Comrade Mike Brown. Way back in 1983, Mike Brown gave me an assignment. I said, this man's a lunatic. He brought about 100 reels of reel-to-reel tape and tell me to convert these from reel-to-reel to cassette. and I had to listen to every one of Adrian Fraser from whence we came. Perhaps the only person who have listened to everyone is Adrian Fraser and myself. Thank you, Mike, for that indoctrination. Right? Blazer Williams, Blazer, the very first publication I wrote, Blazer read it for me. It's actually on Yolimo, for those of you who don't know. And very soon we'll be celebrating the 50th anniversary of Yolimo. And Mike, Blazer, we need to get that printed. All right? Perhaps with a forward by you or Mike. Okay? I also recognize we have people like Koja in Kwame, Daki, Ricky Adams from CDC. Ricky gone? Yeah, Ricky. I have to call Ricky name because when I was doing my PhD and I run away on weekends to engineer, he used to give me a ride from the airport because we used to come together and go together. So I must mention Ricky sometime. If he didn't give me a ride, I might get fired. Right? Good. So we have in the house a lot of very important persons. And finally, I want to thank I call her Denise, I don't know why, Vanessa. I suspect, Zoila, that the reason I'm here, that Vanessa probably leaked something to you. I am supposed to be presenting a paper. I say supposed because we know about the virus going around now. At the annual conference of the Caribbean Association of Historians. And the paper is called Migration as a Post-Disaster Management Strategy. And in this paper, I'm going to look at the 1989-1990 disasters in St. Vincent, where there was a concerted effort to get the Garifuna people to leave the island. And for heaven's sake, these people wouldn't leave. And Vanessa translated it from English to French to me, and I believe she leaked to say, well, this fella in some deep stuff, I think you should bring him back. But even it was that, thank you very much, Vanessa. Now, this morning, my presentation is entitled Urimi and the Garifuna, the problem of syncretization, identity crisis, and ethnicity. Now, in this presentation, I'm going to make a case for reviving Garifuna heritage and culture through education. I will examine the history of the Garifuna of Urimi and the reconstitution in Central America. We are speaking precisely Honduras, Nicaragua, Belize, the entire region. For my friends who are from North America, who tend to say Mesoamerica or Middle America, you know, in academics, we always have to be very politically correct. So students, we no longer say slaves, we now say enslaved, okay? Take warning, so make sure when you do your sexy CSEC or CAPE, enslaved, not slaves, because they didn't volunteer to be enforced. So the presentation will show that after what many call exile, I don't use the word exile, because if you use the word exile within the context of Edward Campbell Bradford, who died recently, his narratives of exile and return. And students, anything I tell you, you should make a note because you know it'll be very helpful. Usually, when we use the term exile, it means that you will go and at some point you will return, right? In colonial policy, they use the term deportation. Deportation. So recently, with the Windrush generation, you would have heard that from the UK, they deported a number of Jamaicans back to Jamaica. People who were born in Jamaica, and they left when they were 1 year old, 2 year old, 3 year old. You're not British. Also, from the US. You're not American. You were born there, you were given a passport or a green card, but they can deport you. The earliest writers on the Garifuna, they use the term exile. And I do not use the term exile. I use the term banishment because they were sent and you're not supposed to come back. You're banished. You're like you were sent to hell. Right? In fact, they expected you to die. So the long-term result of this travesty of justice, and perhaps that's why Professor Newton has supported this, because what occurred was a travesty of justice. And all of this today is part of trying to correct that historical wrong, trying to set up a framework for a wider program of reparations, because all of this is part of the demand for reparatory justice, not only just enslavement. It is the crime against Garifuna, also African enslavement, the exploitation of East Indians. And we could also, to some extent, include even some of the European descendants, because if you take what happened to people from Madeira, don't think that they had an easy life. They had a hard life as well. And if we go to 1862, which Dr. Fraser would tell you about, the fact that they were out in Georgetown, Bentic, and so on, and fighting one another, it is a result of the whole issue of colonization. So the long-term result of this travesty of justice is an identity crisis in recent times, in which many people refuse to accept that Garifuna is an authentic ethnicity that is a product of syncretization. And I use the word syncretization as an encompassing concept. Later on, I will go into a little more theory for the sake of those from academia and for the sake of the senior students who will have to engage with this concept. So this presentation will argue that the rise of DNA testing has become a way of underscoring the genetic syncretization. However, we need to note that genetics and culture are disparate categories. They are not one and the same. Genetically, you can be white, but culturally, you can be black, as many West Indian plantation owners found out when they went to England. So, we will discuss at some point the Creole Society thesis, Plural Society thesis, and most recently, hybridity, as argued by the Asian scholars, most noticeably Homi Bhabha and the wider school that have given rise to what we call subaltern studies. So the presentation will conclude that culturally, Garifuna is a major part of what we call today Vinci. We will begin with a video to illustrate to you the very beginning. In the video, there's no audio for the video. I'm going to talk over the video. So you just look at one of the screens. Yeah. Right. So in the video, which is called The Arrival of Columbus, and they're portraying you, Columbus arriving, making his first landfall in the Caribbean, which you know, students, is in, okay? And you are seeing how Columbus or the Europeans were welcomed. We know that the early peoples did not originate in the Caribbean. We are told that they made their way from Europe across the Bering Strait and an ice bridge into North America, made their way down through Central America into South America, and from there they came across to the Caribbean islands. So that when the Europeans arrived, they met these islands peopled. These people welcomed them. They had their own systems of governance. They had their own dietary practices, etc., words, names, and so on. And through this exchange of cultures, we have eventually the European power overpowering them through their military might. In the case of St. Vincent and the Grenadines, we know that the first peoples were called by the Europeans the Caribs. They never call themselves the Caribs. They never call themselves the Caribs. There were a variety of names that you would find in the literature. You would find Kalinago, you'll find Garifuna, you'll find Garaganu, and so on. But by and large, the Europeans call them the Caribs. Eventually, the terminology appears Black Caribs. Obviously, through intermixing, you have the emergence of a new kind of gene or genotype, or perhaps you could say ethnicity if you want to stretch it. And this is nothing new. If you look at what happened in North America and the Eastern Seaboard, if you study the history of North America, if you read, for example, Nash, Red, White, and Black, you would see how the Europeans in New Netherlands, that's where the Netherlands, the Dutch went and created the new colony. New France, the French go in and create a new colony. New England, the English go in and create a new colony, and so on. New France is most of what today we call Canada, particular Quebec, and so on. Right? And people like Dr. Friday and Dr. Fraser and Cumber and Mike Brown would tell you a lot about that, who have studied in Canada. Now, these different European powers had different policies as to how you deal with the cultures. For example, the French encouraged intermixing, miscegnation, particularly because of the Catholic Church. And I think I see Father Mark somewhere around. He's still here? Yeah. They encourage intermixing. In fact, they encourage marriages. Not all the time colonial authorities appreciated it. So if we come to St. Vincent and the Grenadines now, which we are dealing here now with the late 18th century. The Eastern Seaboard situation is the late 17th century, 16 something going there. We're talking St. Vincent and Grenadines, 17 something. So during the French period, there was a kind of a tolerance, quote unquote, but I'm not saying that French colonialism was better than English colonialism. I'm just getting you to understand that some people are a little more tolerant, but it doesn't mean that we're not going to run you. With the coming of the British now, and the expansion of the plantation system, land became more important. So therefore, we have to remove you. And one British policy was always, they call it deportation. So after the first, second Carib War, Garifuna War, it doesn't matter what term you want to call it. The war for the seizure of indigenous people's land, native people's land, first people's, whatever terminology you want to use. They were moved, captured, taken to Baliso, from Baliso to Rattan Island. And from Rattan Island, they made their way across Central America. And within their own way, they kept alive their culture, their language, everything. But where did all of that originate? It had originated right here in St. Vincent and Grenadines. Okay? But meanwhile, at home, colonization began to erode all of these things. It began to erode. British colonization, in effort, tried to make every colonist an Englishman or an Englishwoman. That was the intent. And we still have the legacies of it. And within this post-colonial society, we are trying to get rid of some of them. One of the things we fight about is for example, is English. English, all across the region, there's this argument of whether you must speak dialect or Creole and so on. All of that is the legacy. And earlier on I mentioned Camo Bradford. And one of the reasons why I love Camo's work is the fact that he insisted in celebrating the use of our own language, what he calls nation language, or what some people call Creole or Patois. Good. So the Garifuna are removed and they are in Belize. In the meanwhile at home, you have the process of othering being continued, where the colonial authorities are saying these people who are here are not the original Caribs, because the original Caribs no longer exist. Through interbreeding, intermixture, mixing, you don't have a pure anymore. Within the academy, we recognize that you can have the creation of a new cultural form. Camo came up with this thing called Creole society, which is to say, through the intermixing, for example, of English and Amerindian or English and African, you can create a new form. Today, the Asian academics call it hybridity. Most recently, you have people like Paul Gilroy in his book called The Black Atlantic. And in this book, he's trying to explain why in Britain you have a different kind of black culture. But all of these are recognizing, all of these academics, all of these works are recognizing that through some kind of blending, you can have the creation of something new. So I'm saying to you that clearly by the time of the deportation, we had already present in St. Vincent a new ethnicity. That is, whether you want to call it Carib, Garifuna, whatever terminology you want to use it. Hence, today, if you were to take a DNA test, you're going to find, as many persons have been finding out, that your result is going to show that you have some kind of European blood, you have some kind of African blood, and they will tell you, depending on which form you go to, Native American or Amerindian. And I understand that David Darkey Williams did one, and I know many colleagues who have done them. So genetically, we all may have some of those genes. But remember I said genes and culture are different. Culturally, many of the practices that we are have inherited, what some academics call cultural continuity or cultural transfer and so on. If we think about what we eat, I don't know a Vincentian family that have never eaten farine and zabuka. Who never eat farine and zabuka in here? Farine and zabuka. Who in here have never done a barbecue? Avocado. Avocado. Yeah. You have it? Right. With boiled fish. That's the famous one. It's farine and zabuka with boiled fish. Right? Then barbecue, the way of cooking. Every year, hurricane. Where did the word hurricane come from? Where did the word hurricane come from? Anybody know? Yeah, these people, these first people who gave it the name. When the Europeans came to tell them, oh, you see the season, it is hurricane season. What? Hurricane season, what do I mean? Well, they found out when the winds come. And they say, oh, that's what I mean hurricane come. Don't think the American scientists who predict, they didn't give it the name hurricane. Place names, look all around St. Vincent and the Grenadines, place names, Walalabu, Waraku, Bayabu. Every day you pass it. In fact, I would say to you, linguistically, a lot of the way we speak, much of the way we speak, is a reflection of the intonations that we have inherited. Think about it. Think about, just look at a Vincentian speak and how they shape the word and so on. Right? Just think about Waraku. Look at them, Waraku. Just think about it. Right? So you have these continuities. Now, notwithstanding that, in recent times, we still have a problem of whether or not we should say we are Carib or Garifuna. Before history class, I was in the University of the West Indies in 1991, and I nearly got my head bust. Because there was a young lady sitting next to me. She was from St. Vincent, but she was living in Barbados. Her mother was from St. Vincent. And I got her and say, oh, she's a Carib. She said, no, I don't eat nobody, me and a Carib. And after the class, she warned me, don't you tell nobody, hey, I ain't Carib anymore. I said, well, I'm sorry, miss, I'm sorry. 1990, I'll never forget. I could give her her name, but she might not like it now. But many years after, too, when I began teaching, and one of the good things is that when you teach students who are doing law, you get to meet a lot of students from Belize. And I was there teaching this class of law students history. And this young lady was looking at me intensely. I said, why is she looking at me so? I hope she ain't trying to get me in trouble. So after the class, everybody left. She came up to me. She said, sir, thank you. I said, thank you for what? She said, thank you for talking about Garifuna. I am Garifuna. I said, well, why you didn't get up in the class and say it's Garifuna? She said, no, me, you want to laugh at me. Right? So we have that problem. So much so that up to late last year, I'm going to read it just to you quickly. Gilberto Amaye, hope I'm pronouncing his name right. He's a development worker. He lives in the US, in Fairfax, Virginia. After conducting some public business at a government agency in Virginia, Amaya recalled, I was leaving the line and a Latina clerk heard me speaking Spanish. So she called me back to the counter because for ethnicity he had checked black. You checked the wrong box, the clerk said. You can't check black, you speak Spanish, you have to check Hispanic. So today, Amaya is a member of the Census Bureau National Advisory Committee on Racial, Ethnic, and Other Populations. And he is in fact Garifuna. And he has been campaigning for Garifuna to be included as a category in the 2020 US Census. Of course, I would share all of this with the Garifuna Heritage Foundation. So that in 2020, in our census, do we or will we, or in the 2021, will we have Garifuna? Because when I worked as a census supervisor in 1990, the first thing they told me is the interviewee will say who they are. But I do not remember in 1990 anything being the Garifuna. Right? So the question is, as we go forward, how do we cater to celebrate ethnicity? Are we still afraid to claim who we are? How do we manage this double consciousness? When March comes around, we want to celebrate Garifuna Week, we want to celebrate Garifuna culture. But what happens after that? Do we only put you up on a pedestal? Okay? Now I'm going to show you a video. And this video is from Pirates of the Caribbean. Pirates of the Caribbean. And put in the audio as well.
Because that's all I need to listen to. representation. We were arrested for trying to help you. Be facing the gallows.
Pay close attention. Pay very close attention now. Look. All right, that's enough. You could get it on YouTube and look at the entire thing in your own time. Now, that scene is mixing fact with fiction. Not in the way in which Blazer Williams did it in his most recent work, The Radical. You need to get a copy of a very good book, looking at the 1970s. You can mix fiction with fact. What they're doing here is using the argument around cannibalism, which is one of the main reasons why a lot of people do not claim that they're Garifuna. And a movie like this, that international media is repeating something that is totally wrong. We have a long way to go. So within our communities, we have to educate people. For those of you who don't know, there's enough evidence that what we call ritualistic cannibalism was practiced. They believe by biting and chewing, and as he did correctly, spitting out, that you will get the power of the energy of a great warrior. But it doesn't, students, mean that you're walking down the road, oh, that white man look good, he's got a hand leg tonight. You cut it off and you're there, yum, yum. Right? And that's him trying to get it. So I just wanted to pull out that scene, and this scene caused a lot of confusion in Dominica because it was shot in Dominica, and the Kalinal community in Dominica had to write and complain and so on. And I don't think they got much support regionally, internationally. But these are the kinds of challenges we are up against in 2020. That still, that image of people being barbaric and being uncivilized and so on continues today. So we need to do more education. And one way we can do it is reincorporate. Could you go, for example, next slide. Within the dance, the art and culture. This is a photo from 1910. And the caption which is up there is Carib family. Next one. This is 1950. Again, Carib family. But these are images that are not very popular. The ones we tend to see are the ones from 17 something, which are to portray this image of barbaric and culture and savage. Next one. This is a recent painting by a young Vincentian artist, Calvert Jones. I don't know how many of you know Calvert Jones. And he have done 2 impressions, which he shared with me. This one is a reinterpretation of what happened during the Carib War. He used actual events in the 21st century to help reinterpret. The lady in the middle at the bottom is a Haitian mother who was defending her child from the police authorities in Haiti. And he took it and went back to the early time and said, if I am a mother and someone is coming for my daughter, what will I do? If I am a Garifuna and someone is trying to dispossess me of my land, what would I do? So these are the kinds of things we have to consider pursuing in the 21st century. Next one. Right. So this is the video cancel. It's too fine. Right. Thank you. You could stop there. So as we move forward, we have to continue this project. I will say to you that the Honorable Prime Minister, in his book he published many, many years ago called History and the Future. History and the Future. It's a very good read. And in this book, he makes a case of how we can use history to construct the future. Because as we all know, if you don't understand where you're coming from, if you don't understand your past, you will not be able to reconstruct and construct your future. It always amazes me that to become an American citizen, you have to do a course of it. It always amazes me, right? I don't think to come up in Vincentian you need to do any history, do you? Huh? I don't think so, but we should. We should. If you want to build consensus and so on within this society that is emerged out of creolization, hybrid, because today we have people who have Vincentian of for example, Sierra descent. What do we share in common? What do we share in common? So how, as a people who are concerned about Garifuna origins, how are we going to secure it? How are we going to secure it? Right? So we have to find ways and means in which we can continue this fight and transfer these values. Good. So I want to stop with saying that today, with the hundreds of thousands of Garifuna all over the world, in all different capacities, St. Vincent and the Grenadines as the homeland, as the place where all of this began, we have a great future once we know how to harness it. And an important element of this is we must recognize that Garifuna is in all of us. It is a product of syncretization, of the mixture, of the various different cultures, and it lives within us. We don't need to look around, just look within. And with that, I want to leave you with a song by my good friend and colleague, Vibration Skate, which Skate said a song several years ago on Garifuna. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Scott. I was busy there trying to make notes, but half the time I was so absorbed in what you were saying, I don't know if I listened or captured what you were saying. But I know that he's going to send me to my dictionary, go to dictionary anymore. Google. a lot of the words that he used. I have to go and look them up on Google to make sure I quite understand them. However, I was impressed with his use of real examples in different grenadines of our Garifuna heritage. I know that we've been trying over the years to have us understand how we were influenced, but it's kind of a nebulous thing that he's trying to hold on to. But with him giving us these very concrete examples, I think that would help the work further along. He called for more education, of course, and I also liked the way he said securing our culture. Because it's all about, the hybrid and the othering and all of that, and we have to make a concerted effort to secure our culture, and there's Garifuna in all of us. I was challenged the other day, I pretended that we were talking about being Garifuna, and said, oh, it's bad to use Garifuna way. So I started going down to show, what 1 point, whatever percent, like what's the name of the state? Trump calls Pocahontas, when she made the whole thing about being indigenous. But it is true, there is Garifuna in all of us. And I just really so much appreciate Rochester. And I also have to say, I wish I was student again. I think I would have liked to come to your lecture. Thank you very much. We're going to now ask Vanessa to move the vote of thanks.
The Garifuna Heritage Foundation would like to say a heartfelt thank you to everyone who made this event successful, and without you, this would not have been possible. First, our Masters of Ceremony, Mrs. Deborah Dalrymple, Head of the UE Open Campus St. Vincent. For the prayer, Mr. Ronnie Daniel. For the remarks this morning, Honorable St. Clair Jimmy Prince, Minister of Education, Honorable Cecil Mackey, Minister of Tourism, Sports and Culture, Professor Velma Newton, Project Director for Improved Access to Impact Justice. For the cultural items, the Lourdes Primary School and Mr. Jamal Francis. Our keynote speaker, thank you very much, Dr. Cliff Scott. For the decoration of the hall, Mr. Crichton, Mrs. Aline and Mr. Alexi Crichton, sorry. And for the floral arrangement, Patsy's Mini Marts. Regarding the conference planning and logistics, we'd like to thank our partners, the University of the West Indies Open Campus and Impact Justice, to the Government of Canada and UE. Our collaborators, the Ministry of Education and the Ministry of Tourism, Sports and Culture. For sponsorship and financial support, we would like to thank National Properties, Impact Justice Project, Cultures of Resistance Organization, Bank of SVG, National Insurance Services, Searchlight Newspaper, the SVG Teachers Cooperative Credit Union, EHL, St. Vincent Building and Loans, Kingstown Cooperative Credit Union, Arabesque Inc., East Caribbean Metals Industries Limited, Video, Mr. Ruben John, Ellis and Associates Inc., Government Printry, and Peace Memorial Hall Board. For the live coverage of the conference proceedings, we'd like to thank NBC Radio and Mr. Montgomery Monty Cupid. Tables and chairs for the exhibition, the Kaliakwa Town Board. For all the tourism bags that were given to our guests, SVG Tourism Authority. We would like to thank all the presenters for the conference and the workshop. For translation services, Mr. Dexter Rose. The conference secretariat services, REDO, and the Garifuna Heritage Foundation Secretariat. For the conference planning, meeting and accommodation, the Alliance Française. For the videography, Mr. Cap Talcom. Refreshments for the conference, we thank the National Insurance Services and Beach Commerce Hotel. The planning committee, we would like to thank REDO, Ms. Joselle John, Ms. Maxine Brown, Ms. Cladonia Peters, Mrs. Joan Jack, Mrs. Merle Delito, Mr. Aki Alton, Mr. Robert Joyette, Mrs. Pat Patty, Mrs. Deborah Dalrymple, Mr. David Darcy Williams, Mrs. Zoila Ellis Brown, Ms. Sheriff Brown, and Ms. been done. Our rapporteur, Ms. Nadia Slater and Mrs. Lisa Edwards, thank you for the work that you're doing. From the Department of Forestry, we'd like to thank its director, Mr. Fitzgerald Providence. For the arts, as mentioned earlier on, we'd like to thank Mr. Pretty Duckwell and the members of the media as well that are here with us today. We would like to thank you all for attending this opening ceremony, and we hope to see you all and more at 1 p.m. for the commencement of the session.
Thank you, Vanessa. As Vanessa mentioned, the conference will continue this afternoon, the session on climate change, and there will be a workshop at the Memorial Hall on 7 skills. Gathering and analyzing oral history among friends and family, a brief study skills session for aspiring researchers. So that will be at 1 o'clock at the Memorial Hall. And I would also like to let you know that those of you who are interested in Garifuna language materials, Dr. Gwen Muniz Gonzalez has materials, puzzles. Dr. Muniz Gonzalez, with your hands of certain siblings. Oh, yes. She has a workshop on Friday. But I wanted to say that the materials are for sale. There are puzzles for 10 US. Everything is for 10 US. Puzzles, picture games, numbers games to help children to be excited about the Garifuna language. So I just wanted to say that on Dr. Gonzalez's behalf. I now invite you to share the refreshments that are being served across the hall, and to thank everyone for coming and for being at what has been a very wonderful session today. Thank you.